The 34th floor boardroom smelled of leather and cold rain on glass. Arthur Sterling's hand trembled as he slid the paper across the table. Marry the mechanic from Queens in 7 days, or watch Caldwell devour the empire. Chloe Sterling, the youngest, CEO on the Fortune 500, drove herself to that rusted garage at dusk, the contract folded inside her clutch like a loaded weapon. She found him kneeling on cracked concrete, oil-blackened hands tightening the chain on a child's pink bicycle. A small girl with a worn stuffed rabbit looked up and asked if she was the fairy who had come to take her father away. Chloe could not answer. She had come to buy a husband. She was about to learn she had walked into something far stranger than charity. The 34th floor was empty, except for the hum of the building's nervous system and the soft clink of a plastic fork against a paper carton. Chloe Sterling stood alone at the wall of glass, eating cold sesame noodles from a takeout box she had forgotten 3 hours ago, watching Manhattan blink beneath her like a circuit board nobody had bothered to switch off. 2 in the morning, the same hour she had lived in for 9 years. On her desk, a silver picture frame lay face down. She did not turn it over anymore. The photograph inside showed a woman with her hair, her mouth, her quiet, a woman who had died of a slow grief at the age of 41, because Arthur Sterling could never get on a plane home in time. Chloe had been 12 when they buried her mother. She had not cried at the funeral, and she had not cried since. She had made a promise to that closed casket. She would never be soft enough to break the way her mother had broken. The intercom on her desk lit up. The night clerk's voice came through careful and small. "Ms. Sterling, your grandfather is requesting the boardroom at 7. She set the carton down. 7 meant something was wrong. By morning, the long mahogany table was set with water glasses and a single sheet of paper face down at her seat. Arthur Sterling sat at the head, both hands folded over the cane that he no longer pretended he did not need. His jaw worked sideways, the small, sad tremor of a man whose own body had become a country he could not entirely return to. The Parkinsons took something from him each year now. This year, it had taken the old steadiness from his voice. Richard Caldwell. He said, has been buying our proxies for 6 months, quietly, patiently. He has 38%. He's going to take us, Chloe. By Christmas, if we do nothing. She knew the name, the way a sailor knows the name of a reef. Caldwell had hated the Sterlings since 1987, since the year his younger brother had walked into the East River with stones sewn into his coat after Sterling Global had crushed the manned shipping line out of existence. Caldwell had never sued. He had simply waited the way certain men wait for a generation to pass and a granddaughter to arrive. "What do you propose?" she said. Arthur slid the paper across the table. Her name was already typed on the top line. So was a second name she had never heard in her life. Nathaniel Cross. Auto mechanic. Queens. "Marry him," her grandfather said, "in 7 days. The shareholders need to see something steady at the head of this family. A husband, a child, a life that is not a corner office and a takeout box at 2 in the morning. Marry him. Or on Monday, I sell my 51% of the voting stock to Richard Caldwell." She stared at him. The hand that held the paper trembled, and not from any disease. "You would not." "I would." His old eyes did not move. "I love you enough to make you hate me for it." He had not told her the rest. She would not know for a long time that there was a rest. By 6 o'clock that evening, she was driving herself across the bridge into Queens, with the contract folded inside her clutch and a taste in her mouth like pennies. She had pictured a man in a stained tank top with an attitude that could be bought for a 6-figure allowance and a clean suit. She had pictured someone she could keep at the far end of a very long hallway for 18 months and then walk away from without a second look. The garage on Northern Boulevard had a flickering neon sign that read, "Cross and Saw," except the sun had gone dark years ago. Inside, the air smelled of motor oil and old coffee, and something colder than either. He was kneeling on the cracked concrete, his back to her oil-blackened hands tightening a chain. The thing under his hands was not a car. It was a small pink bicycle with training wheels. A child was watching him from a folding chair, swinging her feet, holding a stuffed rabbit so worn that its ears had gone the color of weak tea. The child saw Chloe first. "Daddy," the little girl said very softly. "There's a lady." He stood. He wiped his hands on a rag. He did not smile, and he did not pretend to be surprised, and Chloe felt for one flicker of a second that he had been waiting for her since long before the boardroom that morning. "Mr. Cross," she said. The word husband would not come. The child slid off the chair and walked over to Chloe with the gravity of a much older creature. She tilted her head back. Her eyes were very large. "Are you the fairy who came to take my daddy away?" Chloe Sterling, who had once told a hostile board to go to hell in 3 different languages without losing her pulse, found that she could not produce a single word. She looked at the little girl. She looked at the contract in her hand. She looked at the man standing in the half-light of his own ruined shop, and she realized she had not in fact prepared for any of this. "Lily," he said gently. "Go and put your shoes on, sweetheart." Lily went. He watched her until the side door closed. Then he turned back to Chloe, took the contract without a word, and signed it on the workbench between a coffee cup and a wrench without reading a single line. He handed it back. "Will Lily have her own room?" he asked. It was the only thing he asked. "Yes," Chloe said. "Good." His eyes were the color of rain on slate. "Then we have an arrangement, Ms. Sterling." That night after she had gone, he drove out alone past the city limits to a small cemetery where the wind moved through cheap flags and cheaper plastic flowers. He stood for a long time at one stone. He laid his palm on the cold granite, as a man might lay a palm on a sleeping shoulder. "I'm sorry," he said, almost too soft for his own ears. "I have to disappear one more time. For her." He did not say the woman's name out loud. He had not said it out loud in 2 years. Then he got back into the borrowed truck, and he drove to the only address in Manhattan that had ever been waiting for him. The penthouse in Tribeca smelled of fresh lilies and money. Lily clutched the rabbit to her chest and stared at the windows that went floor to ceiling at a city she had only ever seen from underneath. Chloe stood at the marble island, in clothes she had not changed since the office, and read the rules off her phone like a memo. "Separate bedrooms. We do not touch. We do not appear together except for company functions. The allowance is $50,000 a month deposited on the 1st. After 18 months, we file for an amicable divorce, and you and your daughter walk away with a settlement that will keep you both comfortable for the rest of your lives. Are these terms acceptable?" "Mr. Cross, they are." "Good." She did not look at him. "The housekeeper will show you to your rooms." She walked away down the long hall, and behind her, she heard him kneel in the doorway of the child's bedroom. She glanced back without meaning to. He was tucking the worn rabbit beside the small, dark head on the pillow, and he was whispering something to the sleeping girl in a language that was not English. The cadence of it was old and gentle, like a lullaby that had crossed an ocean. Chloe did not understand a single word, but she would remember that she had heard it. She told herself it was nothing. She told herself, walking to her own cold room at the far end of the floor, that she had simply purchased a stranger and his daughter for 18 months, the way she had purchased everything else in her life. She had no idea yet what she had actually brought home. The first 2 weeks taught her that 2 ghosts could share a 5,600 square foot apartment without ever brushing sleeves. Nathaniel left at 6 every morning in the canvas jacket he had brought from Queens, came back at 7, smelling faintly of metal and rain, and went straight to the kitchen to cook for the child. The $50,000 she deposited on the 1st sat in his account on the 31st, Untouched and embarrassment she could not seem to provoke him into spending. He wore the same 3 shirts in rotation. He bought Lily fruit and milk from the bodega downstairs, the way a man buys for a child who has only just remembered what it feels like to be safe. Chloe watched from the edges. She told herself it was clinical observation. It was not. Sterling Global was bleeding. The Pacific freight lane was suddenly snarled in customs paperwork that had never been a problem before. A routing exemption the company had used for 11 years was all at once under review. Omnicorp, a contract worth $800 million over 4 years. A deal she had personally walked through 14 rounds of negotiation, vanished at the last meeting. The CFO of Omnicorp would not return her calls. By the end of the 2nd week, she understood that Caldwell had bought him too, and that the war had quietly become a siege. She came home at 3 in the morning, the night the Omnicorp deal died. The penthouse was dark, except for one small lamp at the Marble Island. Nathaniel was sitting there, alone, in a clean gray t-shirt, reading a paperback whose cover had gone soft from use. A pot was already on the burner, the lid steaming gently. He marked his page when she came in. He did not say hello. He stood up, ladled soup into a shallow white bowl, slid the bowl across the marble toward her with 2 fingers, and sat back down. She stared at the bowl. She did not sit. "Why are you doing this?" she said. Her voice came out harder than she had meant it. "Because you have not eaten since morning." He turned a page in his book. "I noticed." The simplest sentence she had heard in 9 years. "I noticed." 2 words that her assistants did not say, that her board did not say, that her grandfather, who loved her, had somehow forgotten how to say. She sat on the leather stool at the island, because her knees had decided without consulting her that they would not hold her up much longer. She ate the soup. She did not look at him while she ate it. She did not trust her face. When she was finished, she stood, and she walked to her bedroom, and she locked the door. And she did not cry, because she had promised a closed casket 20 years ago that she never would. But she sat on the edge of her bed in her $10,000 suit for a long time, with her hands pressed flat to her thighs, and she breathed. 3 nights later, Lily woke up with a fever of 103. Nathaniel was already pulling on his coat for the all-night pharmacy when the child clutched the back of Chloe's silk robe with a hot, small hand and would not let go. He looked at Chloe. She looked at him. He went without a word, and the door clicked shut behind him, and Chloe Sterling was alone in a dim bedroom with a sick 6-year-old who was watching her with eyes too big for her face. "Miss Chloe," Lily whispered. "Do you hate me?" Chloe Sterling, who had built a $100 billion logistics empire by the age of 32, did not know how to answer a 6-year-old. "No," she said. It came out rough. "My mommy is gone." Lily's voice was very small. "I don't have anyone to ask the girl things to, about hair, and about, things." Chloe sat down on the edge of the bed, because there was nowhere else for her body to go. After a while, she put her hand very awkwardly on the child's hot forehead. After a longer while, she began to stroke the dark, tangled hair, the way she vaguely remembered her own mother had once stroked hers in a life that had ended on a Tuesday in October when Chloe was 12. "You can ask me," she heard herself say. "If you want." Lily fell asleep with her cheek on Chloe's wrist. Chloe sat there, unable to move it, until Nathaniel came home with the medicine and saw them and stopped in the doorway and did not come in for a long moment. Then he set the pharmacy bag down on the dresser, and he did not say anything about it ever, but the air of the apartment changed in some small way that she could not have charted on any spreadsheet. She began to notice things about him. A satellite phone matte black, the kind oil rig captains carried hidden in his sock drawer, the morning she went to put away laundry that the housekeeper had left on the wrong bed. A single watch in the back of his closet, kept inside a plain leather pouch, a Patek Philippe Grandmaster chime prototype, of which she knew, because she had once tried to buy one as a corporate gift, only 7 existed in the world, and none of them were for sale. A man named Sebastian, who came to the building one Sunday, in a quietly expensive suit, who shook Nathaniel's hand at the door and called him Sir, before Nathaniel cut him off with a look. Sebastian's hands were crisscrossed with small white scars in the places where men learn to hold knives wrong before they learn to hold them right. She did not ask. Not yet. She told herself she was building a case. The Sterling Foundation gala was on a Saturday. She put him in a tuxedo because she had to, and when he walked out of the dressing room in black silk lapels and a watch she had never seen him wear before, something rose in her throat that was not surprise and not lust and not anything she had a word for. He looked in that suit like a man who had spent his whole life in rooms exactly like the one they were about to walk into. "Try not to talk to anyone," she said, because she could not think of anything else to say. "I won't," he said, and offered her his arm. The ballroom of the St. Regis was already braying with old money when they arrived. Caldwell came across the floor with the smile of a man who had paid for his table and intended to be seen at it. He was holding a checkbook. He was holding a pen. He was holding 300 faces worth of attention because he had timed it, and he stopped 6 feet from them and clicked the pen open like a knife. "Mr. Cross," he said, loud enough for the chandelier, "I have admired your patience, truly, a working man taking on sterling charity. Allow me to formalize my appreciation." He wrote, he tore, he folded, he stepped close and pressed the folded check hard into the breast of Nathaniel's tuxedo. $1 million. The room had gone very quiet around them. "Take it, son," Caldwell said, "and go back to Queens. She deserves better than a man who smells of motor oil." Chloe felt the blood go out of her hands. She opened her mouth to say something she did not know what, but Nathaniel had already moved. He moved the way a man moves who has done a thing many times before. He bent down, picked up the folded check from where it had drifted to the floor between Caldwell's polished Oxfords, refolded it once with 2 fingers, and slid it back into the inside breast pocket of Caldwell's own dinner jacket with the gentle, almost apologetic care of a man returning a borrowed pen. Then he leaned in. He spoke perhaps 6 words very softly into Caldwell's ear. He did not raise his voice. He did not touch him. Whatever those 6 words were, they were not in English. Caldwell's face did something Chloe had never seen on a human face before. The color went out of it from the hairline down like wax under a hot lamp. His mouth opened and produced no sound. His pen dropped to the carpet. He turned, walked, and then ran, not gracefully, not even pretending to be casual about it, across the ballroom and out the side doors, leaving his wife and his coat and his table and his entire engineered evening behind him. The orchestra kept playing. 300 people who had not heard the words, only the silence, slowly turned back to their drinks. Nathaniel offered her his arm again. In the car on the way home, she tried to keep her voice even. "What did you say to him?" "I knew some people," he said, watching the rain on the window, in his world. "A long time ago. Old business." It was the first lie she had ever heard him tell. She knew it was a lie because his face did not change at all when he told it, and the faces of honest men, she had learned, always change a little. She hired Marcus Reeve the next morning. He was a former MI6 man who ran a small, unmarked office above a bookshop in the West Village, and he came recommended by the kind of people who do not give recommendations twice. She paid him in cash. She gave him 3 photographs and a name. He told her 3 days, possibly 4. He called her in 2. "Miss Sterling." His voice on the line was not the voice of the calm professional she had paid. It was the voice of a man speaking from a payphone he intended to walk away from. "Burn this number after we hang up. Throw away the phone you are using. Listen to me carefully. Mr. Reeve, Nathaniel Cross does not exist. There is no birth certificate. There is no school record. The driver's license is real, but the chain that produced it is not. Whoever built this man's identity did it with encryption I have only ever seen on assets at the very top of the food chain, sovereign-grade state level, the kind of money that builds its own infrastructure. Do you understand? Mr. Reeve, I need... My server farm in Reston was wiped 60 seconds after I pulled the first thread. I do not know who did it. I do not want to know. I am leaving the country tonight. Do not look for me. Do not ever say my name out loud again. I'm sorry, Miss Sterling. He is not what you think he is. Whatever you think he is not it. The line clicked. She drove home at a speed that would have lost her license on any other night. He was sitting on the leather couch in the living room when she walked in reading to Lily, who was already asleep against his shoulder. He looked up. He looked at her face. He carried Lily to bed without a word, and when he came back, he stood across the room from her with his hands in his pockets, and he waited. "Who are you?" she said. Her voice did not shake. She was proud of that. He looked at her for a long time. There was something in his eyes she had not seen there before. Not fear, not anger, but a tired, terrible tenderness, as if he had been preparing for this exact moment for 2 years, and had hoped very privately that it might never come. "Some things, Chloe," he said, "if you learn them, you cannot unlearn them. The world I came from does not let people walk back. Are you sure you want to ask?" For the first time in her adult life, Chloe Sterling did not finish a question she had started. She held his eyes. She thought of Lily's hot, small hand. She thought of the bowl of soup at 3 in the morning. She thought of her mother, who had once asked all the wrong questions of a man who could not love her back and had broken on the answers. "Not tonight," she said. The words came out quiet. "Not yet." He nodded once, and the nod was almost a thank you. Lily turned 7 that Friday. Chloe had a board meeting that ran past 5 o'clock. The proxy fight against Caldwell was bleeding her calendar dry. Her assistant had triple confirmed her attendance. At 4:45, she stood up in the middle of a presentation, picked up her bag, and told the chairman of the audit committee that she would call him in the morning. She drove herself to a small bakery on Bleecker, watched the woman behind the counter pipe pink frosting onto a lopsided cake the bakery did not normally sell, and brought it home in a white box on the passenger seat, balanced like a sleeping infant. Nathaniel had hung paper streamers from the kitchen archway. There were exactly 3 party hats on the marble island. Lily was wearing the one with the sequins and a small paper crown, and when she saw Chloe walk in with the white box, she let out a noise so happy it was almost a sob, and ran across the marble floor on her bare feet and threw both arms around Chloe's waist. "Mom, Chloe!" she shouted. "You came! Mom, Chloe! You came!" The marble seemed to hold the word in the air for a long second. Lily froze against Chloe's stomach. Nathaniel, with a candle in his hand, didn't turn around for several seconds, and when he did, his eyes were wet, and he did not bother to hide it. Chloe knelt down on the kitchen floor in her $4,000 suit and pulled the little girl into her chest with both arms, and the cake sat forgotten on the marble, and for the first time in 20 years, something inside her very quietly broke open. She knew kneeling there that she was not going to file for divorce in 18 months. She knew she was not going to file at all. She did not know that down on the street in a black sedan parked between 2 delivery vans, 4 men were watching the elevator camera feed on a tablet, waiting for her husband's morning departure. Caldwell had been margin called the day before. He had lost everything in a single overnight cascade of position closures, and his accountant, weeping on the phone at 6 in the morning, had told him only one thing, that the buyer of every one of his debts, every loan, every covenant, was a holding company he had never heard of, a fund that did not return calls, a name that did not show up on any registry he had access to. NH Vanguard. His own private investigator had spent 2 days clawing back through 9 layers of shell companies before producing a single old founding document photograph, and the face in that photograph was one Caldwell had already seen 3 weeks earlier, leaning into his ear under a chandelier the size of a small car. Caldwell, with nothing left to lose and one last grenade in his hand, had hired the men in the sedan that afternoon. They did not move when Nathaniel walked out of the lobby at 8:23 the next morning, the way he did every morning, in his canvas jacket and his work boots. They waited 2 more hours. They waited until the housekeeper went out for groceries. Then they came up. Chloe heard the front door splinter. She had time to push Lily off the kitchen stool and toward the pantry, time to whisper, "Stay quiet. Baby, do not come out. Do not come out for anyone but me," before the first man came around the marble island with a black hood and a handgun and said something she did not hear. The second man hit her across the temple with the butt of his pistol. The marble came up to meet her face. The last thing she saw before the dark closed over her was the pantry door, small, white, latched, and the last thing she thought very clearly was please. Then there was nothing at all. The first thing Chloe knew was the smell of her own blood on marble. The second was a hand at her temple, large and warm and steady, and a voice somewhere very far above her, saying her name as if it were the only word the man speaking it had ever been afraid to say out loud. "Chloe, Chloe, look at me. Stay with me. Stay with me." She opened her eyes. Nathaniel was kneeling over her on the kitchen floor in his canvas jacket, with grease still on his knuckles, and a face she had never seen before. Every soft thing about him scraped off and underneath something colder than any boardroom she had ever stood in. He looked at the pantry door, which was open. He looked at the splintered front door. He looked at the empty space on the marble where a pink party hat with sequins had fallen and been stepped on by a man's boot. A small muscle moved in his jaw. That was the only thing in his face that moved. "Sebastian," he said into the matte black phone he had already drawn from his coat. He did not raise his voice. "Protocol Vanguard. Get my daughter back. All of it." He laid his coat over Chloe. He pressed the heel of his hand to the bleeding place at her temple. He did not let her stand up. "You are concussed," he told her very gently. "Stay with me. Help is coming. Nathaniel." Her tongue was thick. "Lily they took, I know." He kissed her forehead once, exactly once, and the gesture was so careful it nearly broke her. "I'm going to go and get her now. I need you to live until I come back. Can you do that for me?" She nodded. She did not know if she nodded. He was already moving. He did not run to the elevator. He walked. The walking was somehow worse than the running would have been. 8 minutes later, 3 black SUVs that had not existed an hour earlier were stacked under the awning of the building. Sebastian came up through the splintered door first, with 2 other men in dark suits behind him, and his hands no longer looked like a stranger's hands. They looked like exactly what they were. He nodded once to Nathaniel, sir, without saying it, and pressed an earpiece into Chloe's ear before she could refuse it. "Stay on the line, Mrs. Cross," he said. "Your husband would like you to listen. He believes you have the right." She heard in her ear the hush of an SUV interior in motion. She heard the soft, mechanical sound of a magazine being loaded. She heard Nathaniel speaking to someone in Russian, then in something that was not Russian, then in English again. "Brooklyn," he said. "Warehouse on Beard Street. Drone has thermal. 4 men. Lily is in the southwest corner, alive, kneeling. They have not hurt her. They are waiting for the wire." "Copy, sir," another voice said. "Tell the wire to be late," Nathaniel said. She heard tires on wet asphalt. She heard a door open. She heard very faintly her daughter's name spoken under the breath of the man she had married for money, and who was not, it turned out, the man she had married at all. What happened in the warehouse on Beard Street took, by Sebastian's later count, 38 seconds. Chloe heard the door go in. She heard a man shout something in a language she had heard before at 3 in the morning, whispered over a child's pillow. She heard the wet sound of a wrist being broken and the louder, drier sound of a knee giving up the body it had spent 40 years carrying. She heard a single shot, no more, because the rest were not necessary. She heard her daughter scream once, not in pain, but in the way a small child screams when she sees her father's face after a long, frightening morning. And then she heard the voice. She knew the voice that had asked if there was a bowl of soup ready, saying, "I've got you, sweetheart. Daddy's here. Daddy is right here." She closed her eyes against the marble floor. She let the tears come for the first time in 20 years, and there was no one in the apartment to see them, which made it almost bearable. When they brought her daughter back to her half an hour later, Lily was asleep against Nathaniel's shoulder, with her thumb in her mouth and the worn rabbit clutched against her chest. He laid the child in Chloe's lap on the leather sofa, as if he were laying down something he had spent 2 years learning not to break. Then he sat down on the coffee table opposite her, with his elbows on his knees, and he looked at his hands for a moment, as if he could not quite believe they still belonged to him. "I owe you a truth," he said. She nodded. She did not let go of her daughter. He told her his name, his real name. Not Nathaniel Cross of Queens of Grease and bicycles and a broken neon sign, but Nathaniel Harrison Vanguard, the man behind the closed door at the very back of the world, the founder and sole principal of NH Vanguard, Holdings, a sovereign-grade fund that quietly carried $4 trillion in assets, and quieter, still the debt of more than 200 names on the Fortune 500 list. He told her about a woman he had loved. He told her about a Tuesday 2 Octobers ago when that woman had gone out to buy bread and had never come home because Nathaniel Vanguard had frozen the laundering pipeline of an organization that did not allow such things to go unanswered. He told her how he had buried his wife under a different stone, in a different state, under a different name, and how he had taken his small daughter with him into the only kind of disappearance that could keep her alive, the kind that ended in a garage in Queens with a flickering sign that read, "Cross and Son," where a granddaughter would one day be sent by the only man on the East Coast who knew where to look. "My grandfather," she said. The word came out very quiet. "My father," he said, saved his life in a country we are not going to discuss tonight in 1968, pulled him out of a ditch and carried him 5 miles. Arthur Sterling has been the only person in this hemisphere who has known where I was for 2 years. He gave me a place where my daughter could grow up with concrete under her bicycle and a sky over her head. And he hoped quietly, the way he does everything, that the granddaughter he loved most in the world might someday find the only man he had ever entirely trusted, and that the two of you might decide on your own. He did not tell me. He could not. The men who killed Elena were still alive. If the wrong word reached them, Lily was the wrong word. And now, he looked up at her. There was no triumph in his face, only a tired, clean exhaustion, as if a weight he had carried for 2 years was at last somewhere on the floor between them. "Sebastian's people closed the last cell in Vienna 8 days ago," he said. "There is no one left who is looking for us. I do not have to be Nathaniel Cross anymore. I am sorry it took men coming up an elevator for me to be able to tell you." She did not answer right away. She rested her chin on the top of her daughter's small head. She thought about a satellite phone in a sock drawer, and a man named Sebastian, and a watch in a closet that had no business being there. She thought about 300 faces in a ballroom, and a check that had been folded back into its owner's pocket like a borrowed pen. She thought about a bowl of soup and a sick child, and a worn rabbit she did not understand. "Tomorrow," she said finally, "you are going to come with me to a boardroom, and you are going to wear a suit that fits you, and we are going to finish what Caldwell started." He looked at her for a long moment. "All right," he said. The Sterling Global boardroom was already full when she walked in the next morning with him beside her in a charcoal suit that was a quieter kind of expensive than any of the men around the table had ever owned. Caldwell had clawed his way back into the building because he still held a board seat that no one had yet had the time to revoke. He was waiting at the far end of the table with the smile of a man reaching for a railing in a fall. "Ms. Sterling," Caldwell began, "I think before we discuss—" The doors opened behind him. 2 men in dark suits walked in with a third man also in a suit, who carried a leather portfolio and an FBI badge clipped to his belt. The first agent set the portfolio down on the polished wood in front of Caldwell. He did not open it. He did not need to. Sebastian, standing quietly against the wall in a corner, no one had noticed him take, gave the smallest nod that he gave anyone in his life. "Richard Caldwell," the agent said, "you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit kidnapping securities, fraud, racketeering, and 1 count of attempted murder. Stand up, please." Caldwell looked across the table at Nathaniel for the first time in his life, and understood finally all of the things he had not understood in the ballroom. The blood went out of his face, the way it had gone out of his face under the chandelier, slow and total, and from the hairline down. Nathaniel walked the length of the long table and stopped at his shoulder. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. He spoke for Caldwell alone, and only barely, and the room had gone still enough that everyone heard. "For your brother, in 1987. He said, 'I am sorry. That should never have been allowed to happen. I would have undone it for you if you had ever asked.' The pause that followed was not a kindness. 'But you should not have touched my daughter.' The agents took Caldwell out by the elbows. He did not resist. He did not look at anyone. That night, in the penthouse with Lily, asleep down the hall, and the worn rabbit tucked once again under her arm, Nathaniel laid 2 pieces of paper on the marble island between them. The first was the contract she had handed him in a garage in Queens, separate bedrooms, $50,000 a month, a divorce in 18 months. He picked it up between his thumb and his finger, and he tore it slowly in half, and then in quarters, and he let the pieces fall. The second piece of paper was blank except for 2 lines of handwriting. A real marriage. No term. No exit clause. He set a pen on top of it, and he stepped back from the marble so the choice was hers, and only hers, and he waited. Chloe Sterling, who had not cried in front of another human being since she was 12 years old, picked up the pen and discovered that her hand was shaking. "Why," she said. Her voice was rough. "When you have the entire world, why would you choose to stay?" He did not move closer. He let her have her marble island. "Because for the first time in 2 years," he said, "I watched my daughter call somebody mom, and because you have never once needed my money. You needed somebody to notice that you had not eaten since morning. I can do that, Chloe. I can do that for the rest of my life." She signed the paper. She walked around the marble island, and for the first time since the night she had walked into his garage in Queens, she put her arms around her husband and let her face rest against the place between his collarbone and his throat. And she stayed there for a long time, and she did not let go. 6 months later, on the morning Sterling Global announced its merger with NH Vanguard Holdings, the boardroom was packed shoulder to shoulder with cameras and reporters, and the glassy surprise of every analyst on Wall Street. The new logo glowed on the wall behind the podium, Sterling and Vanguard, in 2 clean lines of silver. Chloe stood at the microphone in a tailored gray dress, with her husband on her left, and a small girl on her right in a white dress and patent leather shoes, holding both of their hands swinging slightly between them on her toes. Lily tugged on Chloe's hand. She rose up on tiptoes. She whispered something in Chloe's ear that the microphones did not catch. Chloe smiled. She bent down. She kissed the little girl on the top of her head with the kind of slow tenderness she would once have crossed a continent to avoid being seen performing. Then she straightened and she stepped to the microphone, and she let the cameras do what cameras do. "Before we begin," she said, "I would like to introduce 2 people. This is my husband, and this is my daughter." Nathaniel Vanguard, under the table where the cameras did not see, slid his hand into hers and held it. The press did not get that part. They got the rest. They got more than enough. The merger went through that afternoon. The empire her grandfather had built, and the empire the man beside her had hidden, became in the end a single house, and the smallest person standing between them in patent leather shoes was the one who held the door.